Have you ever walked into a room and felt overwhelmed? Not because of the people or the noise, but because of all the stuff. Old furniture, stacks of papers, clothes you haven't worn in years, sentimental items collecting dust. It's like every little thing is quietly weighing you down. Now, here's the truth. Before you turn 70, there are certain things you need to let go of. And this isn't just about clearing space. It's about freeing yourself. Because the older we get, the more important it becomes to simplify, to make our homes easier to manage, and to surround ourselves with things that actually bring us joy. Think about it. Wouldn't life be so much lighter if you didn't have to dig through piles of clutter just to find what you need? If every corner of your home was filled with things that truly serve a purpose? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. 9 specific things that could be making your life harder without you even realizing it. Some of them you're holding on to out of habit. Others, because you think you might need them someday. But the reality is, letting them go can bring you more peace than you ever expected. And don't worry, I'm not just going to tell you to throw everything out. I'll also share personal stories, real-life examples, and simple ways to make decluttering feel rewarding instead of overwhelming. So, if you're ready to create a home that feels lighter, more peaceful, and easier to live in, stick around. By the end of this video, you'll have a whole new perspective on what it means to truly let go. Now, let's get started. Number 1. Old, worn-out furniture. Let's start with one of the biggest sources of clutter, furniture that no longer serves you. Over the years, it's easy to collect extra chairs, tables, cabinets, pieces that once had a purpose but now just sit there, taking up valuable space. And the truth is, holding on to furniture that no longer fits your life isn't just a physical burden. It can also create unnecessary stress. Think about that bulky recliner in the corner that no one sits in anymore. Or that oversized dining table that used to host big family gatherings, but now only gathers dust. Maybe you have an old dresser with sticky drawers that frustrates you every time you try to open them. These things aren't adding to your life. They're just filling space. And as you get older, having too much furniture can actually make your home harder to navigate. The risk of bumping into things, tripping, or just feeling overwhelmed by clutter increases. Take Frank, for example. He's 74 years old and has lived in the same house for decades. Over the years, he collected furniture, some inherited, some purchased, some given to him by friends. At one point, his home felt cozy. But as time went on, he started to notice something. Moving around became more difficult. Cleaning took longer. Certain rooms felt more like storage spaces than places to relax. One day, his daughter visited and casually pointed out that he had 5 chairs in his living room, but only 2 were ever used. That was the moment he realized it was time to make a change. So he started small, 1 room at a time. The broken chair with the wobbly leg, gone. The massive coffee table that made walking through the room a hassle, out the door. And with each item he cleared, he felt something unexpected, relief. His home felt more open, more inviting, and, most importantly, easier to live in. That's the thing about furniture. When it's useful, it enhances your life. But when it becomes nothing more than extra weight, it quietly drains your energy and makes your space feel crowded. So, here's the question to ask yourself. When was the last time I actually used this piece of furniture? If you have to think about it, chances are it's time to let it go. Because a home that's easy to move through, clean, and truly enjoy is far more valuable than any unused chair or table taking up space. And if you're wondering what to do with your old furniture, consider donating it. There's someone out there who does need that chair, that table, that cabinet. And knowing your items are going to a good home makes letting go so much easier. Now, let's move on to the next thing that's weighing you down. Clothes you never wear. Number 2. Clothes you never wear. At some point, we've all held on to clothing we no longer wear. Maybe it's a suit that hasn't fit in years, a dress you bought for a special occasion decades ago, or a pile of old t-shirts stuffed in your drawers. Whatever the case, before you turn 70, it's time to take a hard look at your wardrobe and ask yourself, do I really need all of this? Because here's the thing, having a closet full of clothes you don't wear isn't just taking up space. It's adding unnecessary clutter to your life. Clothing has a strange way of holding memories. That jacket you wore to an important event. Those jeans you used to love but haven't worn in years. Even that pair of shoes that looked great in the store but never felt quite right on your feet. You might not think about them much, but they're still there, quietly occupying space. For many people, getting rid of old clothes feels like letting go of the past. But here's something to consider. Your closet should reflect who you are today, not who you used to be. Take Linda, for example. At 72, she had a closet packed with clothes, but she only wore a handful of items regularly. She had dresses from the 80s, jackets she hadn't touched in decades, and shoes that looked nice but hurt her feet every time she tried to wear them. Every morning, she would stand in front of her closet, staring at the overwhelming number of choices. And instead of feeling excited to get dressed, she felt frustrated. Too many options, but nothing she actually wanted to wear. One day, she decided to make a change. She pulled everything out of her closet and made 3 piles. Clothes she loved and actually wore. Clothes that no longer fit or felt comfortable. Items she was keeping just in case. That last pile was the hardest to deal with. What if she might wear it someday? What if she needed that formal dress again? But as she started letting go of things she hadn't worn in years, she realized something. She wasn't losing anything. She was gaining space, clarity, and a wardrobe that actually made her life easier. And that's the key. When you declutter your clothes, you're not just getting rid of fabric. You're simplifying your daily routine. You make it easier to get dressed in the morning, easier to find what you actually enjoy wearing, and easier to move through life without unnecessary baggage. The best part? Someone else could be using those clothes instead of letting them sit in your closet. Why not donate them to someone who needs them? So, if your closet is overflowing with clothes you never wear, ask yourself, do I really need this? If it doesn't fit, if it's uncomfortable, or if you haven't worn it in years, it's time to let it go. At this stage in life, you deserve a wardrobe that works for you, not one that weighs you down. Now, let's talk about something most people completely overlook: expired medications and old toiletries. Number 3, expired medications and old toiletries. Let's take a quick trip to your bathroom. Open your medicine cabinet, check under your sink, and look through those drawers. Chances are, you'll find something that's been sitting there for years: a half-used bottle of cough syrup, prescription medications from a past illness, a tube of lotion that you forgot about. These things pile up without us even realizing it. And while they may seem harmless, keeping expired medications and old toiletries can actually be dangerous. Medications expire for a reason. Over time, their effectiveness weakens, and in some cases, they can even become harmful. Holding on to old prescriptions just in case might seem like a smart idea, but the reality is, if you ever need that medication again, you should be talking to your doctor for a fresh prescription, one that's up to date and appropriate for your current health needs. And yet, so many of us keep bottles of expired pills tucked away in cabinets, not realizing that they serve no purpose other than taking up space and adding unnecessary risk. Toiletries are no different. That old bottle of lotion you haven't used in years? It's probably expired. That tube of sunscreen from who knows when? It's no longer effective. That perfume you stopped wearing a decade ago? It's just collecting dust. Most people don't realize that skincare products and cosmetics also have expiration dates, and using them past their prime can lead to skin irritation or even infections. But still, we hold on to them, thinking we might use them someday. Take Robert, for example. He's 75 and takes pride in keeping his home organized. But one day, while searching for a bandage, he opened his medicine cabinet and realized it was filled with bottles and boxes he hadn't touched in years. Expired painkillers, half-used tubes of antibiotic cream, a prescription for something he no longer even needed. It was all just sitting there. When he finally took the time to go through everything, he was shocked at how much he had been keeping just in case. And as he cleared it out, he felt a sense of relief knowing that everything left in his cabinet was actually safe and useful. That's what many people don't realize. Decluttering your medications and toiletries isn't just about tidying up. It's about safety. It's about having what you actually need. And it's about letting go of the unnecessary. So, if you haven't checked your medicine cabinet or bathroom drawers in a while, now is the time. Look through your medications. If it's expired, toss it safely. If it's a prescription you no longer need, dispose of it properly instead of letting it sit. And when it comes to toiletries, be honest with yourself. If you haven't used it in over a year, you probably never will. Let it go and enjoy the simplicity of having only what you truly need. Now let's talk about another sneaky form of clutter that most people don't think about: old paperwork and unnecessary documents. Chapter 4: Old papers, documents, and unused mail. Let's talk about one of the most common yet easiest to ignore types of clutter: paperwork. Over the years, it starts to pile up. Old bills, expired warranties, insurance statements from decades ago, instruction manuals for appliances you no longer own. It's everywhere. On countertops, in drawers, inside old filing cabinets, even stuffed into boxes in the attic. And the worst part? Most of these papers serve no purpose anymore. But here's what makes this type of clutter particularly dangerous. It's not just about space. It's about stress. Think about how frustrating it is when you need to find an important document, but you have to dig through stacks of unnecessary papers just to get to it. Or how overwhelming it feels when unopened mail piles up on the counter, making you feel like you're constantly behind on something. The reality is, most of the paperwork we keep is completely unnecessary, and letting it go can bring an unexpected sense of relief. Take Barbara, for example. At 73, she had an entire filing cabinet filled with documents dating back decades. Old utility bills, receipts from long-forgotten purchases, even tax returns from the 1980s. Papers that had been sitting there for years, with no real reason to keep them. One day, as she struggled to find an important insurance document, she realized just how much of her paperwork was outdated and irrelevant. So, she made a bold decision. She would go through everything. It took time, but she sorted her papers into 3 categories: essential documents, important legal, financial, and medical papers that she truly needed; items to digitize, paperwork that she wanted to keep a record of but didn't need in physical form; things to throw away, expired contracts, old receipts, outdated manuals, and all the junk mail that had accumulated over the years. By the time she was done, she had reduced her paperwork by more than half. And for the first time in years, she knew exactly where to find what she needed. That's the thing. When you declutter your paperwork, you're not just making space in your home. You're making space in your mind. You're freeing yourself from the mental clutter that comes with seeing stacks of mail, piles of outdated documents, and folders filled with things you'll never need again. And the best part? With today's technology, most important records can be accessed digitally, meaning you don't need to keep physical copies of everything. So how do you start? First, go through your paperwork with a critical eye. If it's something you haven't looked at in years, chances are you don't need it. Shred old bank statements and expired contracts. If they're no longer relevant, get rid of them. Recycle instruction manuals for appliances you don't even own anymore. Most of this information can be found online. Keep only the most essential legal, financial, and medical documents, and organize them in a way that makes them easy to access when you actually need them. And when it comes to mail, stop letting it pile up. Junk mail? Toss it immediately. Bills? Pay them and file only what's necessary. Newsletters or magazines you never read? Cancel the subscription. The goal here is simple. Only keep the papers that truly serve a purpose and let go of the rest. And once you do, you'll realize how much lighter your home and your mind feels. Now, let's move on to another major source of hidden clutter: kitchen items you never use. Number 5. Kitchen items you never use. Now, let's step into the kitchen. Take a look around. Open a few cabinets. Peek inside your drawers. How many of the things in there do you actually use? The kitchen is one of the most cluttered areas in any home. Over time, it's easy to accumulate gadgets, tools, and cookware that seemed like a good idea at the time but have barely been touched since. Maybe you have a set of fancy dishes you've been saving for a special occasion that never comes. Or a collection of coffee mugs so large you could open a cafe. Perhaps there's an old bread maker in the back of a cabinet, used once and forgotten. It all adds up. And before you know it, your cabinets are overflowing. Your drawers won't close properly, and just finding what you need becomes a daily frustration. But here's the truth. A kitchen filled with unused or unnecessary items doesn't make cooking easier. It makes it harder. Take George, for example. He's 76 and has lived in the same house for decades. Over the years, his kitchen filled up with gadgets and cookware that rarely got used. There were blenders, food processors, and toasters that sat untouched. Plates and glasses stacked high in cabinets. Drawers crammed with tools he didn't even remember buying. Every time he needed something, he had to dig through layers of clutter just to find it. One day, after knocking over a pile of unused baking sheets while searching for a pan, he had enough. He decided to take action. So, he went through his kitchen one section at a time, asking himself a simple question. do I actually use this? If the answer was no, he set it aside. Duplicates? Gone. Expired spices and pantry items? Tossed. That bread maker he bought years ago and used once? Donated. By the time he was finished, his kitchen felt like a completely different space. More functional, more organized, and, most importantly, easier to use. And that's the key. When you let go of kitchen items you never use, you create a space that works for you, not against you. Cooking becomes simpler, cleaning takes less time, and you no longer feel overwhelmed by cluttered countertops and stuffed cabinets. So, take a look around your kitchen. Open your cabinets, check your drawers, and ask yourself, when was the last time I actually used this? If it's been years, if it's just collecting dust, or if it's something you're only keeping just in case, then it's time to let it go. Because a kitchen filled with only what you actually use isn't just easier to manage. It makes daily life smoother and more enjoyable. Now, let's talk about something that can be even harder to part with. Sentimental items that no longer serve you. Number 5. Kitchen items you never use. Now, let's step into the kitchen. Take a look around. Open a few cabinets. Peek inside your drawers. How many of the things in there do you actually use? The kitchen is one of the most cluttered areas in any home. Over time, it's easy to accumulate gadgets, tools, and cookware that seem like a good idea at the time but have barely been touched since. Maybe you have a set of fancy dishes you've been saving for a special occasion that never comes. Or a collection of coffee mugs so large you could open a cafe. Perhaps there's an old bread maker in the back of a cabinet, used once and forgotten. It all adds up. And before you know it, your cabinets are overflowing. Your drawers won't close properly, and just finding what you need becomes a daily frustration. But here's the truth. A kitchen filled with unused or unnecessary items doesn't make cooking easier. It makes it harder. Take George, for example. He's 76 and has lived in the same house for decades. Over the years, his kitchen filled up with gadgets and cookware that rarely got used. There were blenders, food processors, and toasters that sat untouched. Plates and glasses stacked high in cabinets. Drawers crammed with tools he didn't even remember buying. Every time he needed something, he had to dig through layers of clutter just to find it. One day, after knocking over a pile of unused baking sheets while searching for a pan, he had enough. He decided to take action. So, he went through his kitchen one section at a time, asking himself a simple question. Do I actually use this? If the answer was no, he set it aside. Duplicates? Gone. Expired spices and pantry items? Tossed. That bread maker he bought years ago and used once? Donated. By the time he was finished, his kitchen felt like a completely different space. More functional, more organized, and, most importantly, easier to use. And that's the key. When you let go of kitchen items you never use, you create a space that works for you, not against you. Cooking becomes simpler, cleaning takes less time, and you no longer feel overwhelmed by cluttered countertops and stuffed cabinets. So, take a look around your kitchen. Open your cabinets, check your drawers, and ask yourself, when was the last time I actually used this? If it's been years, if it's just collecting dust, or if it's something you're only keeping just in case, then it's time to let it go. Because a kitchen filled with only what you actually use isn't just easier to manage. It makes daily life smoother and more enjoyable. Now, let's talk about something that can be even harder to part with. Sentimental items that no longer serve you. Number 7. Old, broken, or unused tools and equipment. Let's step into the garage, the basement, or maybe that old storage shed out back. For many people, these spaces are filled with tools, gardening equipment, and repair supplies that haven't been touched in years. Maybe you have a rusty toolbox filled with wrenches and screwdrivers you never use. Or an old lawnmower that hasn't worked since the 90s, but you keep thinking you might fix it someday. Or maybe it's a collection of nails, screws, and bolts scattered in jars, just in case you ever need them. The problem? These things take up space, they collect dust, and in some cases, they can even be hazardous. Think about it. Do you really need that broken drill, the hedge trimmer you no longer use, or the 3 hammers when one will do? Holding on to these things just in case only makes it harder to find the tools you actually use. Take Tom, for example. At 71, he took pride in being the guy who could fix anything. Over the years, he collected hundreds of tools, many of which were old, rusty, or broken. But when his son came over to help him install new shelves in the garage, they realized something. Tom had 5 different tape measures, 3 of which didn't even work. There were at least 20 screwdrivers, but only a few were actually useful. After a long afternoon of sorting, Tom realized he had more than half of his tools just sitting there, taking up space. So, he did something he never thought he'd do. He downsized. The tools that were still in good shape, but rarely used, he donated them to a local community center. The ones that were broken beyond repair, gone. And the ones he actually needed, he organized them properly, making them easier to find. And guess what? He didn't lose anything. He actually gained something. More space, less stress, and an easier way to get things done. So, ask yourself, when was the last time you actually used that old saw, that heavy-duty drill, or that pile of scrap wood you've been saving? If it's been years, if it's broken, or if you have duplicates, it's time to let go. And here's an easy rule of thumb. If you haven't used it in the last 5 years, you probably never will. Because at this stage in life, your time and energy are too valuable to waste on digging through clutter just to find the tools you actually need. Now, let's move on to something that almost everyone has, but hardly anyone thinks about: decluttering. Old, outdated electronics and tangled cords. Number 8. Old electronics and tangled cords. Take a look around your home. Open a few drawers, check that storage box in the garage, peek into the cabinet under the TV. How many old electronics are just sitting there forgotten? Maybe it's an outdated phone you haven't touched in years, a laptop that barely turns on, a pile of remote controls from devices you no longer own, or that drawer full of tangled charging cables, half of which don't even fit your current devices. The truth is, technology moves fast. And while we might hold on to old gadgets thinking we'll use them someday, the reality is, we won't. Instead, they just sit there, collecting dust, taking up space, and in some cases, becoming outdated to the point of uselessness. But here's the bigger issue. Many electronics contain materials that can be harmful to the environment if they're not disposed of properly. That means keeping them in storage doesn't just clutter your home. It also stops them from being recycled or repurposed in a way that benefits others. Let's talk about David. He's 73 and spent most of his life working in IT. He loved gadgets and always had the latest devices. But over the years, his home became a graveyard for old technology. He had 3 old computers, several flip phones from the early 2000s, and a box filled with cables and chargers, most of which he didn't even know what they were for. One day, his grandson came over to help him set up a new smart TV. While searching for a spare HDMI cable, they ended up untangling over 30 random wires. That was the moment David realized it was time to let go. So he did his research. Instead of throwing his electronics in the trash, he found a local electronics recycling center that properly disposed of old devices. He even donated his still-working laptop to a community program that provides computers to students in need. And as he cleared out the clutter, he felt a sense of relief. No more drawers stuffed with mystery cables. No more struggling to find the charger he actually needed. His home felt more organized, and his mind felt lighter. So, take a moment to check your home. Do you still have old phones, computers, or tablets that you haven't used in years? What about random chargers, adapters, or remotes you no longer need? Are there dead batteries or outdated printers just taking up space? If so, it's time to clear them out. The best part? Many organizations will recycle or refurbish old electronics for free. Some places even offer trade-in programs where you can get a discount on new devices. So, instead of letting those gadgets pile up in storage, give them a second life, or let them go for good. Now, let's move on to our final category of clutter, the one that's often the hardest to let go of: collections and hobbies that no longer bring you joy. Number 9. Collections and hobbies that no longer bring you joy. Let's talk about something that can be especially difficult to declutter: collections and hobby-related items. Maybe it's a shelf full of porcelain figurines, a closet packed with old craft supplies, or boxes of baseball cards from your younger years. At some point, these things brought you happiness, but do they still? Or are they just taking up space? Over time, our interests change. The things that once excited us might not hold the same meaning anymore. And yet, many of us continue holding on to these collections out of habit, nostalgia, or the belief that they might be worth something someday. But here's the truth. If something is no longer bringing you joy, it's time to let it go. Take Margaret, for example. She's 74 and spent decades collecting fine china and antique teacups. At first, She loved the thrill of finding unique pieces and displaying them in her home. But over the years, her collection grew too large. The cabinets were full, and she no longer had room to display new pieces. One day, she realized something. She hadn't actually used or admired most of her collection in years. Instead, she spent more time dusting and rearranging than enjoying them. At first, the thought of parting with her collection felt overwhelming. But then, she came up with a solution. She kept a few of her favorite pieces that truly meant something to her. The rest? She sold some to collectors, gifted others to friends, and donated the rest to a historical society that would actually appreciate them. And the result? Her home felt lighter. Her mind felt clearer, and she no longer felt the pressure of maintaining something she no longer loved. The same goes for hobby supplies. Maybe you used to love painting, sewing, or woodworking, but now, those supplies sit untouched in a closet. If a hobby no longer excites you, why keep the clutter? Ask yourself, does this collection still make me happy? Am I actively using these hobby materials? Would someone else appreciate them more than I do? If the answer is no, it's time to let go. Selling, donating, or repurposing these items allows them to bring joy to someone else instead of just sitting in storage. And most importantly, it gives you space to focus on what truly matters in your life today. Now, as we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've covered and why decluttering isn't just about letting go. It's about creating a home and a life that feels lighter, freer, and more intentional. Final thoughts. Decluttering is about freedom, not loss. As we wrap up this journey through the 9 things you should declutter before 70, take a moment to reflect. Look around your home. Look at the things you've been holding on to. Are they adding value to your life? Or are they just there, taking up space, collecting dust, and quietly weighing you down? Decluttering isn't about losing things. It's about freeing yourself. It's about making space for what truly matters, for a home that feels peaceful, for a life that feels lighter, for a future that isn't burdened by unnecessary clutter. Every item you let go of isn't just one less thing to dust, organize, or trip over. It's one more step toward a simpler, more intentional life. Think about Frank, who finally got rid of old, bulky furniture and found his home easier to navigate. Think about Linda, who let go of clothes she hadn't worn in years and now enjoys getting dressed every morning. Think about Margaret, who downsized her collection and felt relief instead of regret. Each of them didn't just lose clutter, they gained clarity, peace, and a home that better reflects the life they want to live. Now it's your turn. Go to one room in your house and start small. Maybe it's letting go of that old chair no one sits in. Maybe it's clearing out that drawer of tangled cables and broken chargers. Maybe it's finally saying goodbye to that stack of magazines from 5 years ago. The key is to start, because once you do, you'll realize something incredible. Letting go isn't as hard as you think. In fact, it feels pretty amazing. And if you found this video helpful, let me know in the comments. Which of these 9 categories are you tackling first? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more videos like this. Your support helps us continue bringing you content that informs and inspires. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.